In a factory setting, a worker decides to take a dangerous shortcut by climbing over an active production line carrying steel rods. As he straddles the moving machinery, he appears to make contact with an energized part or loses his footing. A flash is visible as he is electrocuted, his body going stiff before he collapses onto the machine's moving components. This is a fatal violation of basic safety rules. Workers must always use designated walkways and are forbidden from entering the operating area of machinery unless it is de-energized and secured through proper lockout/tagout procedures. At a tire shop, a group of men is working on a large truck tire lying on the ground. One mechanic kneels directly beside it while it's being inflated. Suddenly, the tire and rim assembly fails and explodes with catastrophic force. The blast launches the kneeling man into the air and sends the heavy tire flying. Large, high-pressure tires, especially those with multi-piece rims, store an immense amount of explosive energy. This work must only be performed inside a reinforced steel safety cage, using a remote inflation system to keep all personnel out of the direct line of fire. In a chaotic loading dock area, a woman is crouched on the floor, organizing cardboard boxes. She is completely hidden from the view of a large truck that begins reversing towards her position. The truck's hydraulic liftgate has been left in the down position, extending straight out from the back. The driver, unable to see her, continues backing up. The lowered liftgate strikes the woman, pinning her against the boxes, and then fatally crushing her against the concrete dock. This tragedy was caused by a failure to use a spotter for a reversing vehicle in a congested area, and by the worker positioning herself in a highly vulnerable spot. Loading docks must be kept clear, and reversing protocols are non-negotiable. A yellow double-decker bus approaches a low bridge marked with clear height restriction signs. The driver either doesn't see the warnings or misjudges the vehicle's height and continues forward at speed. The top deck of the bus collides violently with the bridge structure, which completely shears the roof off the vehicle, sending a shower of glass and metal onto the road. This is a severe and dangerous failure of driver responsibility. Drivers of tall vehicles must always know their clearance height and pay strict attention to all posted warnings to prevent such catastrophic accidents. On a dirt road at a construction site, a concrete mixer truck moves forward. A worker on foot, walking alongside the truck, steps directly into the driver's forward blind spot. Unable to see the worker, the driver continues ahead, knocking the man to the ground and running him over with both the front and rear sets of wheels. This is a tragic and frequent type of accident on job sites. Ground personnel must be rigorously trained to stay out of the no-go zones around heavy equipment and to always establish eye contact with the operator. For drivers, using a spotter when pedestrians are present is a life-saving necessity. During a nighttime roadwork operation, a worker stands near a large excavator, well within the machine's swing radius. The operator, focused on their task, rotates the machine's body. The heavy rear counterweight swings around and strikes the worker directly in the head with immense force. The established swing radius of any crane or excavator is a kill zone. This area must be physically barricaded to prevent foot traffic, and all personnel must be trained to recognize and stay clear of the machine's entire range of motion at all times. In a highly automated factory, production lines and robotic arms operate in sync. A worker, focused on cleaning or adjusting a conveyor, has positioned himself directly in the known path of a large industrial robot. He seems completely unaware of the imminent danger. The robot begins its programmed cycle, swinging its heavy arm and clamp towards the conveyor. It strikes the worker from behind with unstoppable force, pinning and crushing him against the stationary machinery. The worker collapses, and it takes several moments for his stunned colleagues to realize what has happened and rush to his aid. This is a catastrophic failure to implement and follow robotic safety protocols. No human should ever enter an active robotic work cell. These areas must be protected by physical fences, safety interlocks, and sensor systems like light curtains that immediately halt the machine if a person crosses into the danger zone. This tragedy is a grim lesson in never becoming complacent around automation.
On an elevated platform at an industrial plant, workers are positioned near a large piece of equipment. One man handles a flexible hose connected to the system. Suddenly, a coupling fails, and the pressurized hose whips around, dousing him with a powerful jet of chemicals. He is immediately engulfed in a vapor cloud and collapses. This incident underscores the extreme danger of pressurized systems. Hoses and their fittings must undergo regular inspection for wear and be properly secured to prevent catastrophic failure. Appropriate PPE, including full-face shields and chemical-resistant suits, is non-negotiable. In a textile factory, a worker tends to a massive fabric winding machine. He reaches over the large, rapidly spinning roll to make an adjustment. In an instant, his arm is caught, and the machine's immense power pulls his entire body in, wrapping him violently within the roll of fabric. His co-workers rush to his aid, desperately trying to halt the machine. For over a minute, they struggle with the controls and attempt to manually reverse the powerful mechanism to free their trapped colleague. This horrific entanglement is a direct result of inadequate machine guarding. A protective barrier with an interlock switch would have shut the machine down. This also serves as a grim reminder to never reach over moving parts. The chaotic rescue highlights the need for clear and practiced emergency stop procedures for all heavy machinery. Inside a busy workshop or warehouse, employees are engaged in their daily tasks. Without warning, a violent explosion erupts in the middle of the workspace, sending a shockwave and debris flying in all directions. The likely culprit is a catastrophic failure of a pressurized gas cylinder. Such cylinders must be stored securely upright, chained in place, and kept away from heat sources or areas where they could suffer physical impact. In a vast warehouse, an operator drives an electric pallet jack down an aisle lined with towering storage racks. He appears to be inattentive or fatigued as the vehicle slowly veers to the right. It makes a seemingly minor impact with the base of a shelving upright. But that's all it takes. The collision triggers a devastating domino effect, bringing down the entire aisle of heavy shelving in a matter of seconds. The operator barely manages to run to safety as tons of product come crashing down. This shows why rack protectors are vital and, more importantly, that operators must remain alert at all times, as fatigue can have catastrophic consequences. A worker is feeding material into a green industrial rolling machine. He is sitting directly on the machine's frame, an incredibly dangerous position right next to the powerful intake rollers. As he guides the material, his hand gets caught. He is instantly pulled in and crushed by the machine. This fatal incident was entirely preventable. The machine had no guarding at its point of operation, a fundamental safety violation. Workers must never place themselves on or near moving machinery. Guards, light curtains, or two-hand controls are essential to prevent such tragedies. In a factory setting, a worker operates a large rolling press. As he guides material into the machine's intake, his hand is suddenly caught. He is violently and instantly pulled completely into the powerful rollers. This tragic incident highlights a critical lack of point-of-operation guarding. Safety interlocks, light curtains, or two-hand controls are essential safeguards to prevent such immediate and horrific accidents. From a high vantage point on a construction site, a crane is lifting a platform with 3 workers on it. Suddenly, the rigging gives way, and the platform violently tilts. One of the workers loses his footing and plummets several stories to the ground below. Riding on loads or platforms not specifically designed for personnel is an extremely high-risk activity and is prohibited on most job sites. Only certified man baskets should be used for lifting personnel. At a port, a crane is lifting a large hopper over a truck. Multiple workers are standing around and on the truck, directly underneath the suspended load. Suddenly, the rigging fails, and the multi-ton hopper plummets, crushing the truck's cab and striking at least one person. The number one rule of crane safety is to never position yourself under a suspended load. A clearly marked exclusion zone must be established and maintained for all lifting operations. This incident was caused by a failure in the lifting gear, underscoring the need for certified riggers and thorough pre-lift inspections. 3 workers stand near a stack of heavy steel I-beams resting on supports. The stack appears to be poorly secured. One man begins to unhook a strap, and the loss of that support causes the entire pile to become unstable. The heavy beams slide off their supports and cascade to the ground, pinning one of the workers underneath. His colleagues desperately try to move the immensely heavy beams to free him. This demonstrates a critical failure in material storage. Heavy, unsecured loads are a constant hazard. They must be properly stacked, chocked, and secured, and bindings should only be removed when the load is stabilized by a lifting device. A woman in a lab coat stands in the lobby of a clinic as a visitor enters through a large, frameless glass door. As the visitor closes the door behind her, it suddenly detaches from its overhead pivot hinge. The massive sheet of tempered glass falls and explodes on impact with the floor, sending shards everywhere. The employee inside is startled, but manages to avoid the main impact. This type of failure points to improper installation or worn-out hardware. The fittings for heavy glass doors require regular inspection and maintenance to ensure they can safely support the weight. Inside a factory, one worker is bent over near a long textile machine. The worker's loose clothing gets caught on a low-profile rotating roller. He is instantly flipped and violently dragged into the machinery. This is another severe entanglement incident caused by an unguarded rotating part. Even seemingly slow-moving components can be incredibly dangerous. Machine guarding and prohibiting loose clothing are critical preventative measures that were ignored here. At a construction site, workers are guiding a crane-lifted concrete bucket into position. One man stands directly in the load's swing path to maneuver it by hand. The load shifts unexpectedly, striking him squarely in the head and knocking him to the ground unconscious. Suspended loads must only be guided using tag lines from a safe distance. Placing yourself in the path of a swinging load puts you at the mercy of physics, a risk no one should ever take. A worker guides a thick metal wire onto a large, rotating spooling machine. His gloved hand gets too close and is caught between the wire and the spool. The machine's torque instantly pulls him off his feet, slamming him against the frame as his arm is dragged into the mechanism. This type of entanglement happens in a split second. Guiding materials should be done with appropriate tools from a safe distance, and all rotating parts require proper guarding to prevent any possibility of contact. In a commercial bakery, a worker is cleaning around a massive industrial dough mixer while the safety cage is lifted up. As she bends down, a co-worker walks up to the machine and, without checking his surroundings, activates it. The powerful mixing hook starts to rotate, catching the woman and pulling her into the bowl. The other workers rush in panic to stop the machine and help their gravely injured colleague. This is a catastrophic failure to follow lockout-tagout procedures. The machine should have been completely de-energized and locked before any cleaning began. The safety guard was bypassed, and the operator failed to ensure the area was clear before starting the equipment. In a processing facility, a massive bulk bag of granular material is suspended from a hoist. A worker climbs onto a metal cart, positioning himself directly underneath the 1-ton bag to cut it open from the bottom. The moment he punctures the bag, the lifting loops fail, and the entire load collapses on top of him, burying him completely. His co-workers are forced into a desperate and lengthy rescue, digging through the material by hand to find him. This is a fatal mistake, born from ignoring the most fundamental rule of lifting: never work under a suspended load. The bag should have been securely placed in a proper discharging station before being opened. This tragic event demonstrates how a shortcut can lead to the ultimate price, leaving colleagues to deal with the horrifying aftermath of a decision that took only seconds to make. In a commercial kitchen, a deep fryer catches fire. A worker panics and throws a container of liquid, almost certainly water, onto the flames. This causes a violent eruption, spreading the grease fire. After the initial mistake, he reacts correctly by grabbing a fire extinguisher to put out the blaze. This is a crucial lesson. Never use water on a grease fire. Water vaporizes instantly, spreading burning oil. The proper response is to smother the fire with a lid or use a Class K fire extinguisher specifically designed for kitchen fires. In a well-equipped gym, a powerlifter prepares for a maximal effort bench press. The bar is loaded with significant weight, and he positions himself on the bench alone without a spotter nearby to assist him. He lowers the bar to his chest with control, but as he attempts to press it back up, his strength gives out. The barbell crashes down onto his neck, trapping him. He struggles violently, unable to breathe or push the weight off. His body begins to convulse from the pressure and lack of oxygen. This terrifying incident is a critical reminder to never perform a maximum lift without a spotter. For solo training, safety catches on the power rack are non-negotiable. They should be set just above chest level to catch the bar in case of failure. Fortunately, others eventually rush to his aid. But those seconds of being trapped could easily have been fatal. Inside a factory, workers stand in a narrow aisle between 2 rows of large industrial machines with exposed belts and flywheels. A man wearing a long, loose shawl draped over his shoulder walks down the aisle. As he passes one of the machines, the end of his shawl is snagged by a rapidly spinning belt. In a fraction of a second, he is violently yanked off his feet and dragged into the machinery. The force is so immense that it pulls him completely into the mechanism as his horrified co-workers run to shut off the power. This is a brutal lesson on the dangers of wearing loose clothing, jewelry, or even having long, untied hair around any kind of rotating equipment. All moving parts should be guarded, and workers must wear appropriate, close-fitting attire. In a busy industrial yard, a man is walking across the paved area, not paying close attention to his surroundings. At the same time, a forklift operator carrying a large, view-obstructing load is maneuvering in the same space. The operator fails to see the pedestrian, striking him and knocking him to the ground. This highlights a dual failure in situational awareness. Forklift operators must use a spotter when their view is obstructed, and pedestrians must always assume they are invisible to heavy equipment operators. At a steel yard, a flatbed truck is parked on a slight incline. A massive multi-ton steel coil suddenly rolls off the side of the trailer. It crashes to the ground and continues rolling, striking and running over a worker who had no chance to escape. This is a catastrophic failure of load securement. Heavy, cylindrical loads must be properly chocked and strapped down to prevent any movement during transit or parking. In a crowded truck yard, a man is standing in the dangerously narrow space between 2 large trucks. Without warning, the driver of the truck on the left begins to pull forward while turning. The driver's massive blind spot prevents him from seeing the man trapped between the vehicles. As the truck moves, The man is caught and crushed between the cab and the adjacent trailer. This is why you must never stand in a pinch point between two heavy vehicles. Drivers must always perform a walk-around check before moving to ensure the area is clear. During the demolition of a building, a worker is operating a jackhammer on a lower floor. Above him, a large, unsupported section of the concrete structure suddenly gives way. The massive slab collapses, falling directly on top of him. Demolition work requires careful engineering and planning to ensure the structure is dismantled in a controlled, sequential manner, preventing premature and catastrophic collapses like this one. A truck driver stands next to his flatbed trailer, which is loaded with enormous, heavy pipes. The load is not properly secured. As he moves along the side of the truck, one of the multi-ton pipes loses its balance and rolls off the trailer. The man has nowhere to go as the massive pipe falls on him, crushing him against the ground. Cylindrical loads are notoriously unstable and require specialized chocks and multiple, heavy-duty straps to be secured safely for transport and unloading. During a circus performance, an aerialist is performing on a hoop, suspended high above the ring. As she is being hoisted upwards, something goes wrong with the rigging or her grip. She suddenly loses her connection to the apparatus and plummets to the ground below. This highlights the extreme risks of aerial performances. All rigging equipment must be inspected meticulously before every show, and safety measures, such as safety nets or harnesses, are crucial for protecting performers from falls. At the edge of a pond, a man is holding a very long metal pole, attempting to retrieve something from the water. He fails to notice that the end of the pole is dangerously close to an overhead high-voltage power line. As he lifts the pole, it makes contact or gets close enough for electricity to arc, sending a massive electrical current through his body. He collapses instantly. This is a tragic reminder that electricity can travel through conductive materials and even arc across gaps. Always be aware of overhead power lines and maintain a safe distance. In a large distribution center, a worker tries to clear a jam on a conveyor belt without first stopping the system. As he pulls at the stuck boxes, the belt suddenly starts moving, catching his arm and pulling him onto the conveyor. He is carried along and nearly crushed against the upper structure, but is incredibly lucky to be thrown clear at the last second. This is a classic example of why lockout-tagout procedures are essential. Never attempt to clear a jam on a moving conveyor belt. A person on an electric scooter is riding towards the entrance gate of a parking lot. A delivery person walks out just ahead of them. Without any warning, the massive, heavy automatic gate suddenly detaches from its upper track and collapses outwards. The scooter rider has no time to react and is crushed beneath the immense weight of the falling gate. This points to a catastrophic failure of the gate's mounting hardware, likely due to poor maintenance or improper installation. Heavy, automated structures require regular safety inspections to prevent such deadly mechanical failures. In a narrow urban alley, a group of people is gathered around a car with a flat tire. One man is crouched down, working on the wheel. An approaching car fails to slow down or notice the stopped vehicle and the people around it. The car strikes the man with great force, then collides with the parked car, creating a chaotic and tragic scene. When a vehicle breaks down, it is critical to move it out of the flow of traffic if possible. If not, warning triangles must be placed far behind the vehicle to alert oncoming drivers of the hazard ahead. A woman in a helmet crosses a wet city street at a crosswalk. As she reaches the other side, a wheeled excavator turning the corner fails to see her. The heavy machine's front bucket strikes her, knocking her to the ground directly in its path. The operator, completely unaware of the collision due to his large blind spot, continues forward and runs over her. This devastating incident highlights the extreme dangers of blind spots on heavy machinery. Operators must use extreme caution at intersections, and pedestrians should always make direct eye contact with an operator before crossing in front of or behind their vehicle. Never assume the operator can see you. At a street-side juice stand, a woman is operating a sugarcane press. The machine has powerful, unguarded rollers designed to crush the tough stalks. As she feeds a stalk into the press, her hand gets too close and is instantly caught and pulled into the rollers. A man rushes to help, struggling to reverse the machine and free her hand. These types of machines are notoriously dangerous, and all in-running nip points must be covered with proper safety guards to prevent such horrific injuries. A farmer is using a tractor in a deeply muddy field. The tractor gets stuck, and the driver tries to power his way out. He gives it too much gas, causing the wheels to dig in. The torque from the rear wheels, combined with the resistance of the mud, causes the tractor's front end to lift. In a second, it flips completely backward, crushing the cabin and trapping the driver. When a tractor is stuck, applying more power is often the worst thing to do, as it can easily lead to a deadly rollover. During an unloading operation, a worker stands on a flatbed truck next to a massive, unsecured pipe. As workers on the ground begin to move it, the pipe suddenly rolls off the side of the truck, crushing the man standing in its path. This is a classic line-of-fire accident. When handling heavy, cylindrical objects, workers must never position themselves on the downhill side. Loads must be chocked and secured until a controlled offloading process, guided by machinery, can be initiated safely. Inside a factory, a worker stands directly beneath a large metal sheet being moved by an overhead crane with a clamp-style lift. The clamps suddenly fail, and the heavy sheet drops directly onto the worker. The lesson here is absolute. Never, under any circumstances, stand or work under a suspended load. All lifting operations require a cleared area below, and workers should use taglines from a safe distance to guide the load, eliminating the risk of being in the drop zone. At a residential construction site, a mini excavator is digging a deep trench right alongside the foundation of a concrete wall. Several workers are in the immediate vicinity. The excavation undermines the wall's support, causing it to suddenly collapse into the trench, burying one worker and sending others scrambling. This is a critical failure in excavation safety. Never dig in a way that compromises the structural integrity of nearby buildings or walls. Proper shoring, sloping, and professional assessment are required before beginning any such work. Inside a vast recycling facility, a person is walking through an area with huge piles of plastic waste. An approaching front-end loader, tasked with moving the material, has a significant blind spot. The operator does not see the person and proceeds to push them with a full bucket, burying them under a mountain of refuse. This highlights the critical need for strict separation of pedestrian traffic and heavy machinery in industrial environments. High visibility vests and clear, designated walkways are essential to prevent such tragic accidents. In an incredibly dangerous act, a worker is lowered into a deep, narrow trench while standing in the bucket of an excavator. As he reaches the bottom, the unstable, unshored walls of the trench give way, burying him instantly. This scene shows two fatal errors. First, machinery buckets should never be used to transport personnel. Second, any trench of this depth requires proper shoring or benching to prevent a collapse. This was a completely preventable tragedy caused by ignoring fundamental safety rules. In a factory, a worker enters the safety-fenced area of an automated production line to make an adjustment. Without warning, the robotic stacking machine activates, moving along its track and crushing the worker against a stationary part of the line. This is a deadly failure of lockout-tagout procedures. Before any worker enters a machine's operational space, the equipment must be completely de-energized, locked, and tagged to ensure it cannot be started accidentally. A man is operating a tracked post-hole drilling rig in a grassy field next to a property line. As he drills, the auger strikes a high-pressure underground gas line. A massive explosion of dirt and gas erupts, violently throwing the machine and operator backward. This dangerous event underscores the universal rule: call before you dig. Always have underground utilities professionally marked before any excavation or drilling to prevent life-threatening encounters with gas, electric, or water lines. On a snow-covered street, a front-end loader is clearing snow near parked cars. A pedestrian, walking on the street due to the snow-covered sidewalk, moves into the loader's path. The operator, likely dealing with blind spots, makes a turn and strikes the person, knocking them down. This illustrates the heightened risks in adverse weather. Operators of heavy machinery must exercise extreme caution, while pedestrians should make themselves visible and avoid the operational area of such equipment. In a warehouse, a worker stands in a marked walkway, completely absorbed by his phone. Meanwhile, a tugger train approaches from behind. The driver initiates a turn, causing the trailing carts to swing wide and collide with the distracted worker, knocking him to the ground. This incident is a lesson in mutual responsibility and situational awareness. Pedestrians must always be aware of their surroundings, especially around mobile equipment, and operators must ensure their path is clear before turning. Inside a factory, two workers are performing maintenance within a robotic cell, apparently having bypassed the safety gates. One worker leans over a component just as the large robotic arm activates unexpectedly. The arm swings around and crushes the man's head and upper body against a fixed part of the machinery. This is a horrific example of why bypassing safety interlocks is forbidden. Proper lockout-not-tagout procedures are the only way to safely service robotic equipment, guaranteeing all energy sources are isolated before entry. On a freshly paved road, a group of workers is standing near the curb as a large road grader passes by. Suddenly, one of the grader's massive tires explodes with tremendous force, sending a shockwave and debris flying. The workers are knocked off their feet by the blast. This highlights the hidden dangers of high-pressure tires on heavy machinery. A catastrophic tire failure can be as violent as a bomb. The lesson is the critical importance of regular tire inspection and maintenance to prevent overpressurization or damage that could lead to a deadly blowout. In a narrow alleyway next to a construction site, pedestrians and workers move about. High above, a large blue panel is improperly secured to the scaffolding. Without warning, the panel detaches and plummets to the ground, narrowly missing several people before striking a worker. This incident is a stark reminder of the dangers of unsecured overhead materials. All items at height must be securely fastened, and exclusion zones should be established below to prevent anyone from entering a potential drop zone. At a high-rise construction site, a crane is lifting a load. A worker on the ground, standing directly under the operation, gets his clothing snagged by the rigging as the load ascends. He is hoisted dozens of feet into the air before losing his grip and falling. This tragic event underscores multiple safety failures. Workers should never be positioned under a suspended load, and proper rigging procedures must ensure no loose equipment or clothing can become entangled. Furthermore, this demonstrates the absolute necessity for fall protection equipment when working at height. At a loading dock, two men are attempting to close the rear doors of a large shipping container. As they struggle with the latches, the truck, which is not properly secured, begins to roll backward. One man fails to get out of the way in time and is horrifically crushed between the trailer and the dock. This fatal incident was entirely preventable. The number one rule when working with trailers is to always secure the vehicle with wheel chocks before any loading or unloading activities begin, to prevent any unintended movement. In a large metal fabrication facility, a group of workers is elevated in a makeshift man basket attached to the forks of a forklift. As the operator maneuvers the unstable setup, the forklift loses its balance and tips over, sending the workers crashing to the ground. This demonstrates a severe misuse of equipment. Forklifts are designed for lifting materials, not people. Only purpose-built aerial work platforms, or man lifts, which provide a stable and secure base, should be used for elevating personnel, ensuring proper training and adherence to weight limits. A forklift operator is unloading a tall, unstable pallet of bottled drinks from the back of a truck. As he backs away, the load begins to tip. The driver makes the fatal mistake of jumping from his cab to try and manually steady the falling pallet. But he is instantly overwhelmed by the weight and crushed beneath it. This is a tragic lesson in instinct versus training. The correct procedure is to let the load fall. No product is worth a human life. Always prioritize personal safety and stay clear of shifting or falling materials. In a stone or woodworking shop, a worker is standing near a series of large, heavy slabs that are stored vertically without proper support. When he attempts to move one, it triggers a domino effect, causing the entire stack to topple over onto him. The immense weight leaves him with no chance of escape. This incident shows a critical failure in material storage. Heavy, unstable items like slabs must be stored in specifically designed A-frame racks that prevent them from tipping and ensure they can be handled safely one at a time. In a busy shipping port at night, a straddle carrier is positioning a container next to a tall stack. The operator misjudges the distance and collides with the stack, destabilizing it completely. A cascade of containers topples over, crashing down onto a nearby yard truck and its driver. This highlights the need for extreme precision and situational awareness in container yards. Operators must manage their speed and maintain safe clearance distances at all times to prevent catastrophic chain reactions.
In the dark of night, a man on a scooter stops next to a parked tractor. He appears to be using a hose to transfer a liquid, presumably gasoline, into a container on the ground. Suddenly, a massive fireball erupts, engulfing the man and the front of the tractor in flames. The flammable gasoline vapors likely ignited from a spark, either from static electricity or the hot engine of his scooter. This is a terrifying example of why handling fuel requires extreme caution. Always do so in a well-ventilated area, far from any potential ignition sources, using only approved safety containers. In a workshop, a man kneels over a large, sealed metal barrel, preparing to use a power tool, likely an angle grinder. The instant the tool touches the metal, the barrel explodes with tremendous force. The blast violently throws the worker backwards across the floor. This is a critical reminder to never perform hot work, like welding or grinding, on any container that has previously held flammable substances. Even empty barrels can contain explosive residual vapors, and they must be professionally cleaned and purged before any work begins. At a busy city intersection, a wheeled excavator makes a wide turn. Simultaneously, a pedestrian attempts to cross the street, placing them directly in the vehicle's path. The operator, dealing with significant blind spots, doesn't see the person and strikes them during the turn. This incident highlights the immense danger of blind spots on heavy machinery. Operators need enhanced awareness protocols, and pedestrians must never assume they are visible to the driver. In such environments, a dedicated spotter is essential. On the flatbed of a truck, two workers are sorting packages. One man grabs a box and, without looking or communicating, carelessly throws it behind him toward a forklift. The heavy package strikes his co-worker directly in the back of the head. The force of the unexpected blow is enough to knock the second worker completely off the truck, causing him to fall a significant distance to the ground. This demonstrates a severe lack of situational awareness and teamwork. Never throw objects in a work area without ensuring a clear path and alerting those around you. At a railway station, a man begins to climb the access ladder on the side of a stationary tanker car. He is dangerously unaware that he is ascending directly toward the high-voltage overhead power lines that power the trains. As he reaches the top of the car, his body gets close enough for the electricity to arc across the air gap. A massive flash erupts as thousands of volts course through him, and he falls lifelessly. These power lines are unforgivingly lethal. One should never climb on any railway equipment and must always respect the marked safe distances from overhead electrical wires. A forklift transports a wide, thin sheet of metal across a road, with the load extending far past the vehicle's sides. A moped rider approaches from the other direction, completely oblivious to the low-profile, hard-to-see hazard. They drive directly into the sharp edge of the metal sheet, which acts like a clothesline, violently throwing them from their bike. Transporting oversized or wide loads requires warning flags, high visibility markings, and potentially a walking escort to ensure the hazard is clearly visible to everyone. A woman exits a bus and proceeds to walk directly in front of it to cross the street. Just as she enters the vehicle's massive frontal blind spot, the driver closes the doors and accelerates forward. The bus strikes the woman, knocking her down and running her over before continuing on its route, the driver apparently oblivious to the tragedy. This horrifying event is a brutal lesson on the dangers of vehicle blind spots. Pedestrians must never cross in front of a large vehicle without making direct eye contact with the driver, and drivers must perform meticulous checks before setting off. Inside the cargo hold of a massive barge, a small front-end loader moves gravel. Above and alongside, a large excavator is tasked with unloading the material. The excavator operator swings their bucket back into the hold for another scoop, but badly misjudges the positioning and clearance. The heavy steel bucket collides with the small loader, instantly flipping the machine and crushing it and its operator against the barge wall. This fatal lack of coordination shows the critical need for constant communication, often via radio and a dedicated spotter when multiple heavy machines are working in close proximity. Clear operational zones must be established and respected by all personnel.